I don't know why I've never planted cacao in my homestead. This little guy growing in a pot is the only cacao plant I have growing. I don't really know much about the plant except the fact that I love chocolate. So I figured that I'd team up with Maddy Smith of Barefoot Chocolatini, who's been growing cacao for over 20 years. And she's agreed to contribute a series of videos to teach all of us how to grow cacao of our own.
Aloha! I'm Maddy Smith, Barefoot Chocolatini, and today we're going to be exploring where chocolate comes from and how to start your own homestead in Hawaii version of a cacao fermentation from tree to bar. Did you know that the cacao fermentation is something that imparts a majority of the flavor in the end product of a finished chocolate bar? 80% of the cacao in the world comes from Africa, but right here on the Big Island, we have access to cacao that's grown in a permaculture style without any pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, grown intercrop with bananas, papayas, native trees to Hawaii like kukui, Malabar chestnut trees, alongside tea plants, bamboo, rambutan, and other delicious edible fruits. Come along and join us. How do I know if my cacao pods are ripe? Is it time to harvest or not? Here we have an underripe cacao pod that if we were to scratch, it would be green. Yet most people would think that if this is yellow like that, it's ready to go. And they'd be right. Yet this pod back here, since it's already started to turn a little bit yellow, it might still be green under the surface. We're going to harvest it anyway because it's ripe. When we start to see any color change, where it turns from the original pod color of an underripe pod to starting to show color, it's a good indicator that it's ready to go. And this is where it's important to know your trees. You need to know what they look like when they're first coming on and over time as they're going from underripe to prime picking. When we harvest, we want to make sure that we are not twisting the pods off. You can, it's not ideal, because what we want to make sure we protect are the flower pads of where the pods grow. They'll grow out of the same spot every time. So we just cracked this pod open and it is underripe. We want to make sure that the fruit pulp looks more developed. This is pretty starchy, kind of like green banana. Ideally, on a red pod, it would be a little bit more cherry color and not so dark ruby. And here's a great example of the color differentiation you want to see. So with the scratch test, this one would indicate it being ripe. Yet there are often pods that are this bright cherry color that might still expose a green underneath, and it would be ripe. The red ones are tricky, so get to know your trees. There's a lot of varieties of cacao that grow in Hawaii. It's kind of hard to identify just based on color or pod shape. We've got some general phenotype indicators that we can identify based on this point it comes to at the bottom, a smoother pod, how many ridges are up here at the top. Primarily, most cacao in Hawaii is a hybrid of a lot of different genetics. Primarily, there's Forastero, Trinitario, and Criollo, but there's also hundreds of other crosses that have taken place as the genetics are constantly getting mixed with their neighbors. You could have multiple genetics inside of one pod, so it's not necessarily true seed to tree, which is why most people would graft cacao if they wanted a very specific flavor profile or type of cacao, depending on their climate. And in order to really be specific and understand what kind of cacao they're working with, you would have to run a genetic test, which can be pricey, and I don't know if it's really that important, but it's up to you. This tree right here is called Gliricidia, also known in South America as Madre de Cacao. It's got these really beautiful pink blossoms, and scientific literature will show that when cacao is growing near these Gliricidia trees, it helps to produce more pods on your cacao trees. We'll go ahead and crack this open and see what's inside. You can hear it go through the top skin, and there it just went through the bottom layers, and we want to turn the knife, not cut those beans, and here you have a perfectly ripe pod. You have white pulp that is not totally translucent. You want it nice and opaque. There's still some inside, and inside, connected to the center, this is called the placenta. It holds all of the beans together, and if I were to cut this, it will reveal a very beautiful color. We like to use these food grade buckets because we're fermenting in plastic, and our primary bucket, this will collect the nectar, and our first bucket that will stick in here has the holes. We'll just double that up, put the cacao innards in here, and we'll just reach into the top, disconnect it from the inner pod, compost that, and break them off that center unit called the placenta. So now that we've got all of the cacao beans out of the pods and in the bucket, we harvested some banana leaf. Okay, got this banana leaf. We'll just go and cut it to fit the shape of the bucket, and there's a naturally occurring yeast that happens on the underside of the leaf that will kind of help kickstart the cacao fermentation. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is a nice touch, and if you don't have access to banana leaves for whatever reason, you can use tea cloth or any sort of fabric to insulate the bucket and keep it warm and protected from bugs. Another option is add in a brewer's yeast of some kind, a bread yeast, a white wine yeast. When we get back, we will put a lid on this to protect it even more, make sure no critters are going in and out, and get this wrapped up with a heat blanket, kind of incubate it and jumpstart that temperature hike. In our next video, we'll be going over the fermentation process step by step. How to do a small batch cacao fermentation from tree to bar, making chocolate straight from cacao grown here in Hawaii, where some of the best cacao in the whole world comes from.
So I gotta say, that was an amazing video. Maddy has put together a work of art there. I better level up my editing game. But that's cool, that's all right. I want more of you out there to feel free to contribute and share your knowledge. And if you want to contribute and share your knowledge and produce videos that I can post here on the Homestead in Hawaii channel for all of us out there to learn from, then hit me up. Leave a comment down below or send me an email at info@homesteadinhawaii.com. And let's stay tuned for more videos from Maddy to continue the series of how to grow chocolate from tree to bar.